You may think Marvin Mims is a good waiver pickup, but he's actually fool's gold. Let's look at Marvin Mims' production from last week. If you're looking at what he was able to do, he's actually only targeted twice last week and twice this week. And yes, he had over 100 yards receiving. However, there are a couple different factors that are going to play into why we're avoiding Marvin Mims on the waivers. And then altogether, we think he's kind of a waste of a waiver pickup, especially if you're using waiver dollars. But in terms of priority, especially if you're prioritizing him over other guys that we think are better. But with Marvin Mims in particular, again, we all saw what the guy did last week. He had 113 yards on 2 receptions. So let's do the math. How many yards per reception is that? Quick math. How good's your math?
113 yards on 2 receptions. That's 50.
57
yards.
Yeah, 57.
57, you round up.
Yeah,
Come
whatever.
on.
Yeah, 57 yards per reception. How sustainable is that going to be? I don't know, but we do play in PPR leagues. So here's our rationale behind this particular one is we're going to value targets and receptions over absolutely everything. Yes, Marvin Mims was a guy that was being pushed up both fantasy and best ball draft boards as the offseason went on, as we realized, okay, now we're not going to have KJ Hamler. Now we're not going to have Tim Patrick. Now Jerry Jeudy is potentially hurt. Cortland Sutton is mid, and we've always known that. We 100% agree with you. 100% agree with you there. However, with Marvin Mims is still a rookie, and we do have to kind of take a step back and realize that. We do have to realize that Jerry Jeudy is still coming back from injury. We do have to realize that Russell Wilson hasn't really played well through the first 2 weeks, and Sean Payton hasn't really been that good for Russell Wilson yet. So Marvin Mims, while we do think as a young talent, especially in dynasty leagues, that he has somewhere to go and has a lot of growth ahead of him for fantasy leagues this year, we are not really in on Marvin Mims.
No, and it's a Marvin Mims maintaining this production is about as sustainable as Brandon Johnson getting the same amount of receptions for 2 touchdowns and 68 yards on the same team. That's not happening again. Not to mention their matchup next week, they're playing the Dolphins, who they shut down the Patriots on Sunday night this last week, and that's not an easy ask.
Marvin Mims is the 9th most trending player on Sleeper right now. We're not using waiver clip on Marvin Mims.
Not at all. I'm not even touching him. Nope. Not even looking at him. Our next guy that we're going to have here is Tank Dell. And this is kind of at the same time, this is us calling our shot for who we think is going to be the wide receiver 1 in Houston. I think no one expected really in fantasy to see Stroud and the Houston offense pass the ball over 40 times consistently. And I think you're going to continue to see that. Stroud is going to throw the ball 40 to 50 times a week. Dameon Pierce is going to get less usage than we expected. And Nico Collins, Tank Dell, Robert Woods, and Dalton Schultz are all going to get a significant amount of targets there. And we're going to call our shot, and we're going to say Nico Collins is the guy to have in that Houston passing offense. It is not going to be Tank Dell. There are a significant number of reasons why we're taking a stance on this and saying it is going to be Nico Collins. But one is the fact that Tank Dell, yes, there was a ton of preseason hype with Tank Dell, and he got boosted up draft boards in fantasy because of what CJ Stroud said about him, what Houston was potentially going to do with him, how they were going to utilize him. And look, what we saw from Tank Dell the last couple weeks has been pretty impressive. We liked what he did in the preseason. We liked what he's done the first couple of weeks. But you have to remember that part of the reason Tank Dell got so many targets was A, a lot of garbage time targets against the Colts, B, the Colts secondary. Nico Collins, granted, was playing the same secondary, but you could tell from the first possession to the end of the third quarter, Nico Collins was the guy for CJ Stroud. I mean, he was the first read. He was the one that was getting the significant. He was the significant option there for sure.
And the significance behind this is that Indianapolis really does have a terrible secondary outside of one person.
Kenny Moore.
And who was Kenny Moore guarding?
Nico Collins.
I mean, what, you had Dallas Flowers on Tank Dell? You think Tank Dell's going to go up against a Dallas Flowers every week? I don't think so. I mean, Dallas Flowers was returning punts last year. And I'm bashing my own team, so my homerism's out the window at this point.
And not to mention, I mean, you got to look at Nico Collins. What he did after the catch was much more impressive than Tank Dell. And, I mean, he had the same amount of receptions. They both had 7 receptions. Collins had 146 yards with those 7 receptions. Tank Dell only had 72. They both had a receiving touchdown on top of that as well. I think looking in the future, I mean, who's going to get the more points without a touchdown? Probably Collins.
Who's going to get the more points?
Who's going to get the more points? It'll probably be Collins because of what he's able to do after the catch, and we believe in that a lot more than Tank Dell. I mean, you cannot ignore the fact that Tank Dell is small, and I know you've heard this before. I know a lot of people want to ignore it. We want to ignore it too. We want Tank Dell to do really well, but in fantasy this year, you've got to take the veteran, you've got to take the more experienced wide receiver, you've got to take the bigger wide receiver, the one who has proven that his after the catch ability is greater than Tank Dell's.
Absolutely.
For now.
The next guy on this list is going to be Matt Breida. And obviously, even today, we saw the headline, Saquon Barkley might be out 3 or more weeks due to just what's just a normal ankle sprain. It still sucks. It sucks for Saquon Barkley owners. It sucks for football fans. And now we are going to immediately, I guarantee he's going to be climbing off the boards, immediately look at Matt Breida and say, that's our guy. Matt Breida is not our guy. No. But honestly, neither is Gary Brightwell. Neither is Eric Gray. I mean, I think that there's a very good chance that the New York Giants come out and spread the snaps across these 3 guys fairly evenly, even if it's only the top 2 guys. But when you're looking at the snap share from Matt Breida in the last 2 games, 23% snap share in the first game and a 3% snap share yesterday. So you might think, okay, yeah, he's definitely the second string back there. But I mean, if you look at Gary Brightwell as well, which I don't even know if you've heard of Gary Brightwell before this episode, 16% in the first game and 3% last week. So pretty much the exact same as Matt Breida. They're just as willing to put him in the game. Yes, situationally, Matt Breida might get a little bit better run on some more opportune snaps. However, first of all, after watching the Giants offense for the past 2 weeks, are you really wanting to take a running back that's not Saquon Barkley out of that offense and put him in your fantasy starting lineup? Because I'm not.
No, I don't think so.
If it wasn't Saquon, how good would a running back actually do there? Yeah, their offensive line is decent, but I mean, at right guard, they've got a glaring hole now. Mark Golinski's not been playing well. Saquon Barkley, even yesterday, was having to pull stuff out of his hat. I mean, pull tricks out of his hat and spin off of guys just to even get down the field. I'm not exactly confident about a guy that's not Saquon Barkley in the New York Giants backfield. So we're going to avoid Matt Breida. We're going to avoid Gary Brightwell. Maybe he gets some volume and some red zone touches enough to produce something next week, but it's too
Eric
risky.
Gray's a flashy new rookie.
There you go. Right. Not touching Matt Breida on the waivers.
No, another guy that we're not touching either, despite the nice touchdown that he had against the Jets secondary, was Jake Ferguson. And I know everyone's so excited because we've just got a big dub here. Yay, Jake Ferguson is a tight end 1, it looks like, for Dallas, and he had 4 targets for 3 receptions, 11 yards, and a touchdown.
Yeah.
Out-targeted by their running back. It took Brandon Cooks being out of the game for him to even get this opportunity. I think this is pretty straightforward. I think this is pretty obvious. I mean, even Luke Shoemaker on 1 target, 1 reception, he got a touchdown too.
Playing in the best offense in the NFL right now. I mean, outside of the Dolphins,
Sure. But I mean, how much they haven't been tested. The defense has been carrying.
And
even though Dallas may have a solid offense, is how much are they really proven? Once they really have to fight for a game, once they really have to fight for a win, who are they going to lean on?
My point was anybody could be scoring a touchdown.
Literally,
it could be it could be Peyton Hendershot in that. I mean,
yeah.
Again, I mean, for tight ends,
even in the off chance that you see Ferguson's volume go up, look what he's doing with that volume. He's not getting many yards. And he's maybe a little bit valuable in PPR, maybe if you have to plug him in here and there at the tight end position, but he's dependent on touchdowns like any other tight end in that offense.
Yeah.
Because CeeDee Lamb has taken all those targets, all that volume. So is Tony Pollard and Brandon Cooks. I mean, at that point, you're looking at the tight end being the 4th option there.
And Deuce Vaughn.
Jake Ferguson right now is the most valuable waiver pickup at the tight end position. I think even more than Zach Ertz, which is laughable.
We prefer Ertz. Yeah, I think that's all you need to know. If you need to pick up a tight end, go Zach Ertz. Next guy's going to be Gardner Minshew. And with Gardner Minshew, I'm sure you've seen Anthony Richardson. He's in the concussion protocol. He's got to stay healthy. We know that as Colts fans. We watched Gardner Minshew play last week. Gardner Minshew for fantasy had 11 points. I mean, when Gardner Minshew, and that's on 70% snap share. So if you extrapolate that over a full game, he's probably getting 13.5 points. So with Gardner Minshew, look, number one, we don't think Anthony Richardson's injury is going to be long-term. It's a concussion. He did play after he suffered the concussion, but he kind of was like, yeah, I'm not feeling super good. He threw his left hand once, so you're like, what is he?
Dude, it was a tight spiral,
that's pretty
too.
Sweet,
Did you see that?
Yeah. And so when Gardner came in, the Colts offense looked fine. They're playing the Texans, though. I don't expect Gardner Minshew to do anything against the Ravens this week if he does play for Anthony Richardson. And then after that, I expect Anthony Richardson to be back. This is just a situational waiver pickup that I think people are going to sprint to do. And I don't think it's worth it, in my opinion, especially if you're going to have to spend waiver dollars on him.
Yeah, I completely agree there. Next guy we're going to have is Hunter Henry, another tight end here who, I mean,
he's
in
produced.
contrast to Jake Ferguson, he's actually consistently produced. But when you really dig into the statistics here, one, you're looking at the fact that Mac Jones, like, can't stop passing the ball. At least week 1, he was passing it a ton. And he had a 42 passing attempts week 2 as well, in a game that we thought was going to be a lot more ground heavy, where they're going to try to slow down the pace of play, and they still pass it 42 times. I mean, with that volume over the last couple weeks, Hunter Henry putting up 17 points this in week 2, which was 16 comparatively in week 1. 6 targets and 7 targets, respectively, with that volume that Mac Jones is providing. I think that shows you that the volume's kind of fluky. It isn't really that significant, and it has taken a touchdown each week for Hunter Henry to put up that production. You take those touchdowns away, how many points is he scoring? 10.
Which is fine.
Which is okay. But again, this is our problem. Hunter Henry is going to be a hot commodity. He really is after his second week of doing this. Our issue is you're looking at other guys like Zach Ertz specifically, who has out-targeted him both weeks and has not scored a touchdown and has put up consistent production.
Yes.
Without that. Hunter Henry, again, take away those touchdowns, he's not putting up as much production as Zach Ertz is. And we know how fluky, we know how volatile touchdowns are in any offense.
Yeah. 100%.
I mean, Zach Ertz is debatably the first option for a very, very limited quarterback in Josh Dobbs in the Arizona Cardinals offense. Hunter Henry is the 4th option, probably.
Anywhere from second to 4th. Like,
yeah.
And who knows who the first is going to be? Like, it could be Parker. It could be Bourne. It could be Juju. Like, I don't know. It's not, you don't really ever want to touch New England fantasy weapons for the most part, with a few exceptions. This isn't an exception for us.
Yeah. I mean, Mike Gesicki, the other tight end on New England, had 6 targets.
Right.
He could have just as easily gotten those touchdowns.
Yes, absolutely. All right, Allen Robinson's going to be the next guy here. Allen Robinson actually plays tonight, so watch Allen Robinson go for 20 points to be the most popular waiver pickup tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
It definitely would be our luck. However, we do know that Deontay Johnson has now been put on IR.
So regardless, he'll be a waiver pickup.
Regardless, he's going to be moving up waivers. Last week, you saw him at 11.4 points on 90% snap share. He had 8 targets, had 5 receptions, and he had 64 yards. And we're still out on him. Why? We have not seen consistent production from Allen Robinson in 3 years now. I mean, it's been a long time. I mean, neither of us had wives before when the last time Allen Robinson was consistently producing.
That is
I think
correct.
that's about all you need to know.
Yeah.
And look, is it possible? Absolutely. Is the talent there? Absolutely. He's 30 years old, though. I mean, he's got to stay healthy, number 1. He has to get viable volume from Kenny Pickett week in and week out, number 2. He's playing on an offense called by Matt Canada, 3. Like, I think there are a lot of signs pointing towards these Steelers wide receivers just not being overly productive, which is nothing new. We do this with George Pickens, right? I mean, Deontay Johnson really was an outlier because of how many targets he got in PPR leagues. But with George Pickens, I mean, we continually say, oh, George Pickens is putting up low, like, wide receiver 2 numbers. What's happening here? I mean, Allen Robinson, if he were to even sniff wide receiver 3 numbers, you're like, okay, maybe. We're predicting, and hopefully this comes true tonight in the game. We're predicting that Allen Robinson's first week was not going to set the tone for the rest of the season, and that he is a waste of a waiver pickup.
Yeah. And our last guy here is going to be Craig Reynolds. And obviously the big news of the week is that David Montgomery is probably going to be out for a couple weeks at least because of his quad injury that he was carted off the field for. And Jahmyr Gibbs, like, what is up with Jahmyr Gibbs? What is up with the Lions not wanting to use their best weapon in the offense? Like, they just want to limit his snap share. They want to limit his opportunity. They just
give him a 60%.
I know he had 40% David Montgomery
even
more.
Give him 60.
Please. That's what we're begging for. And I think you do have to expect that. Even though Jahmyr Gibbs' volume for his second week in a row was not as high as we thought it should have been, they did live up to their promise in that Jahmyr Gibbs was going to get an increased workload. And I think you're going to see that continue in the receiving game for sure, and hopefully in the run game as well. He did have 7 rushing attempts this week. He didn't get much out of them, but I think you have to expect that to go up because Craig Reynolds is not David Montgomery.
Correct.
I don't care what offensive coordinator you are. I don't care if you're Ben Johnson and can make something out of nothing. You cannot make Craig Reynolds as good or better than David Montgomery. I like legitimately do not think you can. I think you finally are forced to have to actually use the weapon that you spent a 12th overall pick on, which, I mean, I don't know why you would ever want to do that. but here we are. We're not taking Craig Reynolds off waivers.
Here we are. All right, if you made it to the end of this video, drop a like on the video to help us beat the YouTube algorithm, the evil YouTube algorithm, and make sure you are subscribed
Sinister.
as well to help grow the channel. Blockfantasy.com/domain is where all of our exclusive content are. That's where our full rankings are. That's where our articles are. That's where our Discord is. That's where our community is, where you can ask us questions literally all the time. Very active on Discord. We'd love to have you over there and joining the community. Blockfantasy.com/domain. Use code domain for 30% off the entire site. We appreciate you guys watching. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you later.